In the summer of 1919, a photograph was taken of a family enjoying a picnic in a sunny, green field. 100 years later, when researchers zoomed in on the background of that image, they discovered a chilling detail that had been hiding in plain sight for a century. It's a truth that history is not a finished thing. It is constantly being rewritten by those with the power to do so. What if some truths are so horrifying that they refuse to stay buried, resurfacing again and again until someone is brave enough to see them? Dr. Helena Whitmore was a historical archivist who specialized in digitizing old photographs. She worked in the basement of a university library, surrounded by boxes of forgotten memories. The room smelled of old paper and dust, and the only sounds were the hum of her computer and the occasional creak of the building settling above her. In March of 2019, she received a new collection from an estate sale in rural Pennsylvania. The collection contained hundreds of photographs from the early 20th century, donated by the last surviving member of the Hartley family, who had died without heirs. Most of the photographs were typical family portraits, wedding photos, and scenic landscapes. Helena had seen thousands like them before. Stern-faced men in dark suits, women in elaborate dresses, children standing stiffly as they waited for the long exposure times to end. But one photograph caught her attention immediately, not because of what was obvious, but because of something subtle that seemed wrong about it. The image showed a family of 5 sitting on a checkered blanket in a meadow. The father wore a dark suit and bowler hat, his mustache perfectly waxed. The mother had on a white dress with lace trim, her hair pinned up in the fashion of the time. 3 children sat between them, 2 boys and a girl, all dressed in their Sunday best. The boys wore knee-length pants and suspenders, while the girl had on a dress with ribbon trim. Behind them stretched a field of wildflowers and distant trees. The sun was bright, casting sharp shadows across the grass. It was a perfect snapshot of American life from a century ago. Helena began the careful process of digital enhancement. She adjusted the contrast to bring out details lost to time. She sharpened the edges that had become soft with age. She removed the yellowing that decades had added to the photograph. This was routine work for her, something she had done thousands of times before. But as she worked on this particular image, she felt an unusual chill in the normally stuffy basement room. As the image became clearer, she noticed something odd in the background. At first, she thought it was just a shadow cast by the trees, or perhaps a dark trunk visible through the foliage. But as she enhanced that section of the photograph, zooming in and adjusting the brightness, she realized it was something else entirely. There was a figure standing among the trees. It was tall, much taller than any person should be. Helena estimated it must have been at least 9 feet in height based on the surrounding trees. Its proportions were wrong in ways that made her eyes water to look at it. The arms were too long, hanging down past where knees should be, with too many joints bending in directions that shouldn't be possible. The head seemed stretched, elongated in a way that made Helena's stomach turn. The face, if it could be called that, was a blur of features that didn't quite align into anything recognizably human. She zoomed in further, but the figure remained blurry, as if it was moving when the photograph was taken, or as if the camera itself had refused to fully capture its image. The more she stared at it, the more wrong it seemed. It wasn't just tall and misshapen, it seemed to exist in a way that violated the basic rules of how things should look in a photograph. Helena showed the enhanced image to her colleague, Professor Marcus Thornfield. He was an expert in photographic artifacts and anomalies from the early days of photography. Marcus was a skeptic by nature, someone who had debunked dozens of supposedly supernatural photographs over his career. He examined the image carefully, adjusting his glasses as he leaned closer to the screen, then pulled back to look at it from different angles. "It's probably just a double exposure," he said at first, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Photographers back then often reused glass plates to save money. Sometimes you'd get ghostly images from previous photographs bleeding through. This could be from an earlier portrait that wasn't properly cleaned off the plate. But even as he said it, Marcus frowned. The figure didn't look like a double exposure. It was too solid, too present in the scene, and its position relative to the trees showed it was actually standing in that space, not superimposed over it. Helena wasn't convinced by his explanation either. She spent the next week researching the location where the photograph was taken. The back of the photo had a faint inscription written in fountain pen ink: Millbrook Meadow, July 1919, the Hartley family. She found Millbrook on old maps of Pennsylvania. It had been a small farming community located in a valley surrounded by dense forests, about 60 miles from Pittsburgh. The more Helena dug into the history of Millbrook, the stranger things became. Census records from 1920 showed a population of 312 people. The town had a general store, a schoolhouse, 2 churches, and a small railroad depot. By 1930, the town wasn't listed at all. There were no newspaper articles about natural disasters, economic collapse, or mass migration. The people of Millbrook had simply vanished from all records. Helena found fragmentary police reports from neighboring towns stored in the state archives. Between 1919 and 1925, there had been numerous missing person cases that seemed connected to Millbrook. Entire families would disappear overnight, leaving their homes intact. Investigators found meals still on tables, some only half-eaten. Clothes remained in closets, money in drawers, livestock in barns. It was as if people had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. The reports were incomplete, with many pages missing or damaged by what looked like deliberate water damage. Someone had tried to destroy these records but hadn't been thorough enough. As Helena continued her investigation, strange things began happening in her office. She would hear faint whispers when she was alone late at night, voices that seemed to come from the photograph itself. They spoke in a language she didn't recognize, though occasionally she thought she heard her own name mixed in with the alien syllables. Objects on her desk would move when she wasn't looking. Her coffee mug would be on the opposite side of her keyboard. Her notes would be reshuffled. Once, she found all her research materials rearranged in a pattern that spelled out a single word: stop. She tried to rationalize these events. The building was old. Perhaps vibrations from the subway caused things to shift. The whispers could be pipes in the walls or wind through old ventilation shafts. But deep down, she knew something was very wrong. The photograph seemed to watch her, and the figure in the background appeared to move slightly each time she looked at it, though it was never in a dramatically different position, just shifted enough to be unsettling. She discovered that she wasn't the first person to investigate this photograph. Hidden in the library's archives, misfiled under geological surveys, she found a folder marked with the initials RF. Inside was a collection of research notes similar to her own, and a single handwritten note dated October 1987. They don't leave. The family that stays. The offering is acceptance, not death. I understand now, but it's too late. When you see them in the photographs, they've already seen you. God help us all. The note was signed by someone named Robert Finch. Helena searched for information about him and discovered he had been a researcher at the same university, working in the very same basement office she now occupied. He had disappeared in November 1987, just weeks after writing the note. He left behind all his possessions, his car still in the faculty parking lot, his apartment undisturbed. The police investigation found no signs of foul play or suicide. He had simply vanished, just like the people of Millbrook. Helena became obsessed with understanding what the note meant. She spent weeks cross-referencing historical documents, looking for patterns across decades of records. She found similar photographs from different time periods, all containing that same impossibly tall figure lurking in the backgrounds. A daguerreotype from 1851 showing a couple outside their farmhouse with the elongated figure barely visible in their barn doorway. A photograph from 1893 of children playing in a schoolyard with that impossible shape watching from a classroom window. A picture from 1908 of a church congregation, the entity standing among the back rows, towering over everyone else, yet somehow unnoticed. Each time, the families or groups in the photographs disappeared within months of the image being taken. The pattern was consistent across decades and locations, all within a 100-mile radius of where Millbrook would eventually be established. The breakthrough came when Helena discovered a journal hidden in the estate collection, tucked inside what appeared to be a hollowed-out Bible. It belonged to Margaret Hartley, the mother in the 1919 photograph. The entries started normally, describing daily life on their farm. She wrote about planting seasons, her children's education, social gatherings with neighbors, and her husband's work at the grain mill. But as July 1919 approached, the tone changed dramatically. Margaret wrote about dreams where a tall figure visited her, speaking without words, communicating directly into her mind. It promised prosperity and protection for her family, not just in this life, but beyond it. She described meetings in the meadow at night, where other families from Millbrook gathered to discuss the arrangement. These weren't fearful gatherings, but excited ones. like people who had won a lottery they hadn't entered. The entries became increasingly disturbing. Margaret wrote about how the entity had shown them visions of the future, of wars and plagues that would come, of economic collapses and natural disasters. It offered them a way to escape all of it, to become something more than human, to never truly die. The price seemed small in comparison to what was being offered. The final entry, dated July 18, 1919, the day before the photograph was taken, contained a full page of text. Tomorrow, we give ourselves to ensure we never truly leave. The children understand and are not afraid. James has made peace with it. The others have already begun their transformation. I can feel it calling to us, pulling us towards something greater than this fragile flesh. We will be eternal, perfect, never aging, never dying. Our bodies will remain, but we will be so much more. The photograph will mark our covenant. Future generations will see us as we were in our last moment of pure humanity. I am not afraid. I am grateful. Helena realized with growing horror what the photograph really showed. This wasn't a family captured during an innocent picnic. This was documentation of a ritual. The families of Millbrook hadn't been taken against their will. They had offered themselves willingly to the entity in the background, participating in something ancient and terrible. But the most terrifying revelation was yet to come. Helena found references to something called the Eternal Preservation in other documents from the collection. The entity didn't kill its victims. Instead, it consumed their consciousness, their souls, their very essence, leaving behind perfect replicas that continued to live seemingly normal lives. These shells looked human, acted human, had all the memories and mannerisms of the original person, but they were controlled by something else entirely, puppets with an alien intelligence pulling their strings. They were the family that stays. These hollow people would integrate back into society, take jobs, have conversations, even start new families. But they were no longer human. They were extensions of the entity, its eyes and hands in the human world. They gathered information, identified new candidates for transformation, and slowly spread the entity's influence across generations. Helena discovered that this practice hadn't ended in 1925 with Millbrook's disappearance. She found photographs from every decade since with the same telltale signs. A wedding photo from 1953, where the entity lurked behind the altar. A high school graduation picture from 1973 with that impossible figure standing among the crowd of proud parents. A company picnic from 1989 where it watched from the edge of the frame. A birthday party from 1998 where it peered through a window in the background. Then she found something that made her blood run cold. A social media post from just 3 weeks ago. A family reunion photo posted on Facebook by someone named Jennifer Hartley Morrison. The caption read, "Perfect day for a picnic. Carrying on the family tradition." In the background, barely visible among the trees, was that tall, distorted shape. The location tag showed it was less than 50 miles from where Helena sat. Helena traced the family. Jennifer was a descendant of the Hartleys from the 1919 photograph, though supposedly from a branch of the family that had moved away before the Millbrook disappearances. She lived in a suburb just outside the city with her husband and 3 children. They had normal jobs, normal lives. Their children went to local schools, played on soccer teams, had friends over for sleepovers. But Helena now knew the truth. She wondered if they were still human, or if they had already undergone the transformation. She faced an impossible choice. If she exposed the truth, would anyone believe her? The evidence was overwhelming but also completely insane by any rational standard. And, more importantly, had the entity already noticed her investigation? The strange occurrences in her office suggested it had. Was she already marked? Would she become the next offering, the next member of the family that stays? Helena tried to contact Jennifer Hartley Morrison, but the woman who answered the phone sounded wrong. Her voice was perfectly normal, friendly even, but there was something underneath it. A resonance that shouldn't exist in a human throat. She invited Helena to visit, to see more family photographs, to learn about their history. The invitation felt like a trap. Helena's fate remains unknown. Her office was found empty one morning, her research scattered across the desk as if she had left in a hurry. The enhanced photograph of the 1919 picnic was displayed on her computer screen, zoomed in on the entity in the background. Her colleagues assumed she had simply quit without notice, perhaps overwhelmed by the isolation of working alone in the basement. But those who look carefully at recent photographs from university events might notice a familiar figure. Dr. Helena Whitmore still appears at faculty meetings, still teaches her classes, still smiles for group photos. She still works in the basement, cataloging old photographs, but something in her eyes has changed. They're too steady, too unblinking, and sometimes when the light hits them just right, they reflect in ways that human eyes shouldn't. She has become part of the family that stays. History is not a fixed thing. It shifts and changes with each new discovery. Some truths are buried so deep that we convince ourselves they never existed, but they're still there, hiding in old photographs, waiting to be found. The entity that haunted Millbrook is still out there, still gathering families, still making its dark bargains. It doesn't force anyone. It doesn't need to. It simply offers something that desperate people want badly enough to sacrifice their humanity for. Look at your own family photos. Look at the backgrounds, the shadows, the spaces between people. Check the windows of houses, the gaps between trees, the dark corners of rooms. You might see something you wish you hadn't. You might discover that someone you know has already joined the family that stays. They look the same, sound the same, but something essential has been replaced. The next time you pose for a picture, check what's behind you, because some things that hide in photographs aren't just memories. They're invitations. And once you see them, they see you too. The very act of discovering them means you've already been noticed. The question isn't whether the entity will come for you, but whether you'll accept its offer when it does. If you found this story disturbing, remember that truth is often stranger than fiction. Like and subscribe to hear more dark mysteries from history. And whatever you do, look closer at your old family photographs. You never know what might be watching from the background, waiting for you to see it, waiting for you to understand that some families never really leave. They just become something else, something that watches and waits and gathers more into its eternal preservation.